Hello, Divine Ones. This is Ashley. This week's symbol is black and white. Duality. The swing of the pendulum. So this will include a little bit of traditional information as well as a lot of channeled information. Information that has came to me through study, through a lot of decoding, through a lot of tarot readings, through a lot of reading myself. Okay, so black and white. We know about yin, we know about yang. We know about good, we know about evil, and we know about duality. And the white and the black represents the full spectrum of God, the full spectrum of light, the full spectrum of life altogether. So in order for it to know the full aspects of God, the full aspects of the laws in this universe, we have to know about both good and evil, both light and dark, both sides of the pendulum, both sides of the coin. So when you see black and white, this is what it's talking about. It's talking about balance. It's talking about good, evil, talking about the full spectrum of God, the full spectrum of human capabilities. So another thing too with this black and white, we're talking about, I'm going to the swing of the pendulum. So with the swing of the pendulum, this is one of the laws of the Kabbalion. So this will also include a little bit of tarot. So with the swing of the pendulum to the right is the same degree of the swing of the pendulum to the left. So we're talking about balance, and we're talking about that you have cycles and seasons in your life. So in the biblical text, in Ecclesiastes, they talk about seasons. And in these seasons, we're talking about there's a season to plant, there's a season to reap harvest, there's a season for war, there's a season for peace. So we can apply this to our life. So when things seem to be on the more downward spiral, seeming to be a little hard or challenging in our life, we know that the swing of the pendulum is going to go to the other side eventually, because that's just the law, the rhythm of this universe. And a lot of times people want to, I have to mention about positive and negative. So with negative would be tied to the feminine energy, and it will be tied to not necessarily how people traditionally would say like negative energy or negative thoughts. It's more so of just balance. So you have positive, you have negative. We have this in science, we have this throughout life. So when you have to recondition your mind, when you're getting into the higher realms of consciousness, when you get into the higher realms, of awakening, you have to step out of the mindset of positive and negative, like good and bad. It's more so about balance. It's more so about this is the way how life works. In order for us to have a positive charge, you have to have a negative or an opposing energy. And that's all that the black and white is saying. Now, continuing on with the tarot, you have the High Priestess card. So I just went into detail in breaking that card down in this week's Twin Flame Starseed Bible Study and Decoding. So you can check that video out if you want a full breakdown of that card. So with those two pillars on the High Priestess card, you have the two pillars are the entrance of the Temple of Solomon. So the Temple of Solomon is about wisdom, and it's about higher realms of wisdom, and it's the entrance before the Holy of Holies. So the priestess herself represents the Holy of Holies in the middle ground. Okay, and when we're talking about the middle ground, we're also talking about in the biblical text in the New Testament, when the Christ mentioned the eye of the needle. The eye of the needle is that small space, that Holy of Holies that most people cannot get to because of their lack of the ability to balance their energies and to tap into that middle ground, the higher realms of consciousness. That's what that represents. So with that being said, with these black and white pillars, we're talking about the duality. And we're also talking about with those two pillars, you have to be balanced in your energy in order for it to go through those gates. So another thing too about mentioning with these gates and the pearly gates, And when a lot of people use this phrase, and you may hear it mentioned by many different people about these pearly gates. They're talking about heaven, and what is heaven? We're talking about consciousness. We're talking about tapping into a certain understanding, a certain amount of wisdom, and that's what those two pillars represent. Once again, to get a full understanding of that card, and you can check out that Bible study. Getting into other types of energies, people call them spirits at times, that when you see black and white, we're talking about the different degrees of light. And so when I say the different degrees of light, angles, angels. And so angels, energy, spirits, all synonymous. When people like to think about angels, they only want to think about certain types of angels. They only want to think about like Archangel Michael, quote unquote, angels of light. But all of the angels are angels of light, from Archangel Michael all the way to Azazel. Okay, and so I mention this because the opposite end of Archangel Michael is Azazel, and that will be the opposing energy to Archangel Michael. And if you read a lot of esoteric information, that you would see that how when I mention King Solomon and King Solomon's temple, that we're talking about being able to having the command over those darker angels, if you will, over the other angles. And when I say angles, I'm talking about viewpoints, how the way to see things. So angels are energies, angles are viewpoints, and viewpoints are thoughts, and thoughts are synonymous with energy, synonymous with spirits. So when you're talking about the full spectrum of light and you're talking about angels, that knowing that there is an equal opposing energy to those forefront angels, if you will. And some people will call them fallen angels, and that would be the equivalent of the angels. So as above would be those angels of quote unquote light, that people like to use that phrase. But once again, let me reiterate that they all are angels of light. And so as above, so you have those angels that stayed above, and then you have those angels that fell below. So we're talking about, once again, balance, and we're talking about what happens in the heavenly realms have to happen in the earthly realms. And that whole aspect of the story is just to illustrate as above, so below, as within, so without. So moving on to the black and white as far as an individual. So you have the shadow side of every individual. They will call it the ego, the persona, etc. So with the white aspect, that will be a person's face, like their face of their self that they show to individuals, their forefront, their persona, their identity. This is what I want to show you. This is who I identify myself with. But then you have the shadow aspect that is really honestly like the true aspect of a person. This could be hidden aspects of their psyche, hidden aspects of their personality that they shun away from, that they don't want people to know, and they may not even know their self. Some people will call it maybe the white could be the conscious part, and the dark or the black could be the subconscious or the suppressed conscious aspect of an individual. So both parts of the individual make up a whole. And I say this because when you are when you are a light worker, you are a light worker on both ends. And you work with both energies. You work with the conscious and the subconscious. You work with the frontal lobe of the brain and the back of the brain. And you work with the left part of the brain, and you work with the right part of the brain. And you work with the part of the individual that everybody wants to know, everybody wants to see. And you work with the part of the individual and their personality or their ego or the shadow self. So with the shadow self is directly connected to the forefront self, the self that people want everybody to see. And when people say you have to have an ego death, the ego death is not, it's I'm not gonna say it doesn't exist, but people try to strive to have an ego death, but you shouldn't have an ego death. You should just have more so of a persona death, more so, because if you are living the smoke and mirrors, the false self, which could be the forefront self, could be what they would call like your persona, that will be the white aspect. And the dark aspect is more so true to who a person really is, but they just shun away from it. So you, instead of having what they would say about that ego death and the shadow self feeds that energy to the forefront self, but it's a lot of blockages. So in order for it to really have that balance within yourself, you have to accept the shadow self. Another thing too about with this healing, and when people say about healing, that all healing is real, people that are really true to healing, is accepting, knowing yourself and accepting yourself. That's just what it is. And a lot of people, what they try to do, they try to have the shadow aspect of themselves and tuck it away and hide it, which builds up a lot of energetic blockages. So therefore, instead of doing that, what you have to do, you have to tap into that shadow self, know that shadow self, and accept that shadow self. So when you see black and white, you see like when you may see it in art, when you may see it with certain representatives may wear black and white, they're making a statement here. And with that black and white, like for example, certain celebrities may only wear black and white. What they're talking about duality, and they're talking about they are knowing themselves, or they're tapping into the energy. So if you want to know yourself a little bit more with colorology, you can wear black and white and really work with that energy. So if you guys have any questions, or you want to share anything about the symbol black and white, please let me know. You can even list a couple pieces of art, links to pieces of art that use black and white. The checkerboard, that's what it represents as well. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, as well as leave a comment. If you have not joined the family here, please hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you can receive notifications when we post new information here. Thank you guys that give the 613 Higher Wisdom, Higher Knowledge Energetic Exchange, known as a donation. That link is down below if you would like to support this ministry. Thank you. And for those that could support this ministry on a continual basis through the Patreon portal, thank you guys so much. And if you would like to join that movement over there, you can by clicking the link down below. The different tiers that we have, we also offer free energy readings every month for being a part of our family. So you guys, free prayer, link down below. And I will talk to you guys later. Peace.